everyone. Welcome back to Rob's Movie Reviews. This week, I'd like to review a movie that is one of my all-time favorites. I discovered this movie as a child on Saturday afternoon television. This was back in the day before there was 100 different TV channels to pick from. You had your local TV stations, and that was it. There was no cable at that time. But I am referring to the 1954 Japanese masterpiece, Godzilla, or as we know it, Godzilla. This is a awesome movie. It sparked a franchise that would last for, 60 years, 60 plus years now. It's been going, still making movies, still doing Godzilla movies, like I discussed in my review last week of Kong Skull Island. The American company Universal's now doing Godzilla films. They've already done two. Next year, they intend to release Godzilla versus King Kong, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm excited to see that. But let's talk about the 1954 masterpiece that started it all. It was produced by Toho Studios in Japan. The film was directed by Ishiro Honda. Also, he co-wrote the film. And it's a cautionary tale from someone who grew up and witnessed firsthand the mass death and destruction caused when mankind discovered how to split the atom and atomic energy was created. So it's a very in that sense, it's kind of a dark film because it's warning of the dangers of atomic power. The film starts out, several Japanese freighters go missing. They can't understand why. They don't know what's happened to them. They got like just a few brief seconds of distress signal, and then they just disappeared off the radar. In the meantime, an American journalist lands in Tokyo on his way to a job in Africa to cover something there, and he decides during his layover in Tokyo to meet up with his old friend, Professor Yamane. The journalist's name is Steve Martin, which I find pretty funny that he has the name of one of my favorite comedic actors who would come along years after this film was made. But anyway, Steve Martin is portrayed in this film in Godzilla by Raymond Burr, legendary actor Raymond Burr. Upon arriving, he finds out about the ships disappearing, the big fuss all over the Japan. People are upset. They want to know what's going on. They can't understand. A rescue ship is sent out to look for the missing freighters, and it too disappears off the radar. It turns out all the disappearances were taking place close to a small island, which is part of the nation of Japan, but it's kind of isolated to itself. It just has one small village on it. And a survivor from the search and rescue ship manages to wash ashore on the island. And that's when he mutters the word just before he dies, Godzilla, which is Japanese for Godzilla. This causes the villagers to reach out for help. Steve Martin is sent along with a handful of military people to the island to investigate what's going on there and to talk to the villagers and get their stories. And while they're there, a hurricane hits. And during this hurricane, Godzilla actually comes up out of the ocean and walks up on the island, destroys nearly half the village, kills half the people in it. This is witnessed by Steve Martin. So when they get back to Tokyo, he relays what they've seen. In the meantime, he meets up with Dr. Yamane, Professor Yamane, who is a anthropologist. It's decided that he should go to the island and investigate. So he is sent along with a much larger contingent of soldiers. And of course, Steve Martin is given permission to go back with them. and he's covering the investigation. And during the investigation, this time in broad daylight, Godzilla emerges from the sea and comes onto the island, and they get their first-hand look at him. And that's when Professor Yamane discovers that Godzilla is some sort of sea monster, presumably left over from prehistoric times. And it's his belief that Godzilla has been awakened by all the atomic weapons testing in the ocean by the United States, all the hydrogen bombs that they've been setting off, which again, like I said, that's what makes this kind of a cautionary movie about the atomic energy, which was a very frightening thing to people in the 1950s. They go back to Tokyo, they relay their findings. Dr. Yamane has a daughter. Her name is Emiko, and she is engaged to one of Yamane's most esteemed colleagues, Dr. Sarazawa. She, however, has fallen in love with a young man by the name of Ogata, and she decides that she doesn't want to marry Sarazawa, and even though her father arranged for her to marry him, she decides to break off the arranged engagement. And when she goes to Sarazawa to tell him, he's in rather a precarious mood when she arrives. He's agitated. He's been approached by reporters and had to run them off. And he decides he needs to confide in someone, so he takes Emiko into his lab and shows her his latest invention, which just absolutely frightens her. It turns out he's created a weapon that he calls the oxygen destroyer. And it's extremely powerful, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it could be used, developed, and made even more powerful by the military. And that's why he's decided to keep the project a secret, obviously. Distraught by what she's seen, Emiko leaves without breaking off the engagement. And then that night, as the city is, Tokyo especially, worried to death because, things have been picked up on the sonar, the radar, and they believe that Godzilla may very well be in Tokyo Bay at this point. So a perimeter is set up around the city. The city's defense forces are deployed, and sure enough, that night Godzilla comes up out of the ocean, and he wanders into Tokyo and wreaks havoc. He destroys several buildings. He tears down a bridge. He destroys a train, killing thousands of people in this process before he goes back into the ocean. After seeing this happen, Emiko can't keep the secret of Sarazawa's oxygen destroyer, because every weapon possible they used machine guns, they used bombs, they had jet fighters firing missiles. Nothing seemed to faze him. So she goes to her father and tells Dr. Yamane and tells him about the oxygen destroyer. Then her and Ogato go to Sarazawa and confront him, telling him that the oxygen destroyer is the only hope for humanity if he doesn't turn this weapon over to the Japanese military so that they can develop it quickly and use it against Godzilla. Tokyo and then maybe the rest of the world is going to be destroyed. He's very reluctant. He breaks out into a fist fight with Ogata, but eventually he realizes that no matter how much he doesn't want to do it, it has to happen. So he does just as I said. He turns the project over to the military. They quickly, within a day or so, develop another weapon, develop a large oxygen destroyer bomb. And while they're in the process of developing it, Godzilla comes ashore again, and this time he just really lays waste to Tokyo. Half the city is burnt to the ground. Tens of thousands of people are killed. I mean, downtown Tokyo looks like a war zone. And you can see here where Ishiro Honda was trying to mirror the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the atomic bombings at the end of World War II. he gets his message across very clearly without coming out and saying it. You know that's the point he's trying to make. But then the Japanese Navy, they take the oxygen destroyer out into the middle of Tokyo Bay. Ogata and Serizawa go down into, put on diving suits. They go down. They set the bomb. As Ogata is returning to the boat, Serizawa severs his oxygen line, because when he gave the project to the Japanese military, he was there overseeing everything. No one else was allowed to see his files, which he has now burned, destroyed. All the files are gone. There's no paperwork left on the oxygen destroyer. So he severs his oxygen line, knowing full well he's going to drown. And after doing that, he flips the switch and detonates the oxygen destroyer, which kills Godzilla and himself. But he does this so that the secret of the oxygen destroyer will die along with him. It's a great story. I love Godzilla. It's a good movie, well written for the type of special effects they had to work with in the 1950s. It actually looks really good. There's some really good visual effects. The musical score is outstanding. I didn't find out until later, when I got older, that the film was not released until 1956 in the United States. It was released in 1954 in Japan. In 1956, an American movie distributing company got a hold of the film, secured the rights from Toho. The movie was heavily edited. All the dialogue, of course, was voiced over into English. And this is when I found out, and it actually kind of upset me, and I'll tell you why. All the scenes with Raymond Burr were actually filmed in Hollywood and then added into the edited version of the film, which was cut down dramatically for time. The original film that was shown in Japan was nearly 45 minutes longer. So there was like 45 minutes worth of footage cut out of the movie. And the entire character of Steve Martin and all of his scenes were shot in Hollywood and then added into the film. And the reasoning for it, which is what really ticks me off, is that back in that period of time in the 1950s, there was so little faith by the movie companies and the television industry in the intelligence of the American public that they thought it was just too complex a story and that nobody would be able to understand it. So they cut out a lot and they put in a character. The whole purpose of Steve Martin's character is to move along and explain various plot points that they thought were just way too lofty for the average American movie viewer. And that, it aggravates me that they think so little of the general public, but it was the 1950s. Over time, I got past that. That just really doesn't bother me anymore. It used to really upset me that was the way it was done. But however, it is what it is. The past is the past. If you get the opportunity and you have not seen the original 1954 Japanese masterpiece, Gojira, or as we know it, Godzilla, you have to see this movie. I would recommend if you can find it and get the opportunity to watch it, watch the uncut original Japanese version, the Japanese release. You will not be able to find it with English voiceovers. That treatment has not been given to the original film. The only way you can find it was with English subtitles. But it doesn't matter, because you'll get into it and you'll find out it's actually a much better film than the heavily edited American version. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this week's review. So I will see you all next week. And until then, you all take care.